The laughter echoed through the crystal halls of the Zelkan High Command like thunder. Admiral Zexkar's massive form shook with amusement as he read the diplomatic message from Earth for the third time. His chitinous armor clinked with each chuckle, and his 4 eyes gleamed with cruel delight. "Special operations personnel," he wheezed to his gathered officers. "The humans want diplomatic immunity for their special operations personnel." The other Zelkan commanders joined in the laughter. General Morthek, whose battle scars told stories of conquered worlds, slammed his armored fist on the crystal table. "What's next? Will they ask us to fear their pet animals too?" Captain Vexthul, younger than the others but equally dismissive, pulled up holographic images of human soldiers on his wrist display. "Look at these creatures. No natural armor, no claws, no poison sacs. They carry primitive metal weapons and hide behind cloth uniforms. How did such weak beings even survive on their own planet?" Admiral Zexkar stood to his full height of 9 feet. His species had evolved as apex predators on a world where everything tried to kill everything else. Their natural armor could stop most projectile weapons, and their strength could crush steel with bare hands. The idea that humans posed any military threat was beyond ridiculous. "Grant their request," he ordered with another laugh. "Let them send their special operative to our capital. It will amuse the citizens to see what passes for a warrior among the humans." 3 systems away, on the human colony world of New Denver, Jake Martinez finished his morning workout in the underground training facility. Sweat dripped from his forehead as he completed his final set of pull-ups. At 32, he looked like any other human male. Average height, brown hair, nothing particularly impressive to alien eyes. That was exactly why he was perfect for this mission. Lieutenant Commander Lisa Rodriguez entered the training room carrying a sealed data pad. Her expression was serious as she watched Jake towel off. "The Zelkans accepted our request. You leave for Vorthak Prime tomorrow." Jake nodded, his face calm despite the magnitude of what lay ahead. "What's our cover story?" "Cultural attaché studying Zelkan art and history. They're putting you in the servants' quarters of the Imperial Palace. Apparently they think it's appropriate housing for a human." Lisa's voice carried a note of anger. "Good," Jake replied, surprising her. "They're already underestimating me. That makes my job easier." Lisa handed him the data pad. "Intelligence briefing is all here. Jake, these aliens have conquered 12 star systems. Their military technology is centuries ahead of ours. Their soldiers are literally built for war." Jake scrolled through the information about Zelkan biology and psychology. "They're also arrogant. Arrogance makes people careless. Careless people make mistakes. The transport ship carrying Jake to Vorthak Prime was a Zelkan vessel, a massive thing that could have housed a human city. Jake spent the 3-day journey in a small cabin designed for Zelkan servants, observing everything around him. The aliens barely acknowledged his presence, treating him like cargo. He watched how they moved, how they communicated, how their society worked. The Zelkans followed strict hierarchies. Orders flowed down from the top without question. Individual thinking seemed discouraged. Everything was formal, ritualized, predictable. When the ship reached Vorthak Prime, Jake got his first look at the Zelkan capital world. Massive crystal spires reached toward the sky, connected by flowing bridges that sparkled in the alien sun. The architecture was impressive but followed the same rigid patterns everywhere. Beauty through order and control. The Imperial Palace dominated the city center, a structure so large it had its own weather systems. Jake was escorted through service entrances by a bored Zelkan guard who spoke to him like he was a pet. Human stay in designated quarters. Human eat at designated times. Human not wander without escort. The guard's translator device made his words sound mechanical and cold. Jake's quarters were in the deepest part of the servants' wing, 3 levels underground. The room was small, bare, and clearly designed to remind him of his place in Zelkan society. Perfect. Over the next few days, Jake established his cover identity. He visited museums, took notes on Zelkan art, and played the part of a curious academic. The Zelkans found his interest in their culture mildly amusing but mostly ignored him. Captain Vexthul was assigned as his official escort, a duty the young officer clearly considered beneath his station. "Your species is fortunate that the Empire values diplomatic relations," he told Jake during one museum visit. "Otherwise, your world would have been conquered by now." "We're very grateful," Jake replied humbly, letting the alien's arrogance wash over him. Every insult, Every dismissive comment, every casual threat was information he could use. During his escorted tours, Jake memorized the layout of government buildings. He noted guard positions, security systems, and daily routines. The Zelkins made no effort to hide anything from him. Why would they? He was just a weak human studying art. In the evenings, Jake sent carefully coded reports back to Earth through his diplomatic communication privileges. Each message looked like academic notes about Zelkan culture. But Lisa and her team knew how to read between the lines. Palace security relies heavily on automated systems, he wrote in a report disguised as observations about Zelkan sculpture. Guards follow predictable patrol patterns. Physical barriers are impressive, but designed to stop Zelkan-sized intruders. The real breakthrough came during a state dinner Jake was allowed to observe from the servants' gallery. He watched as the Empire's highest military commanders discussed their plans openly, secure in the knowledge that no mere human could understand their strategic thinking. General Morthek spoke proudly of the invasion fleet being assembled in the outer system. 12 battle groups, each capable of reducing a human city to ash. Their pathetic defenses won't last a day. Admiral Zexkar raised his ceremonial goblet to the conquest of the human colonies. May their defeat serve as an example to other primitive species who might consider resisting the Empire. Jake sat quietly in the gallery, memorizing every detail of their conversation. The Zelkins had no idea that their harmless human guest understood every word they spoke, or that he was already planning their downfall. That night, as Jake lay in his small servants' quarters, he allowed himself a rare smile. The Empire had made their first and greatest mistake. They had invited their enemy into their home and then ignored him completely. Tomorrow, the real work would begin. Jake had been on Vorthak Prime for 2 weeks when the first cracks in Zelkan confidence began to show. It started small, little things that the aliens couldn't explain but didn't think were important enough to worry about. The morning routine in the Imperial Palace never changed. Guards walked the same paths at the same times. Servants followed the same schedules. Everything ran like clockwork, which made it easy for Jake to move through the massive structure unnoticed. He had learned to time his movements perfectly. When the guard patrol turned left at the main corridor, Jake slipped into the maintenance shafts. When the kitchen staff took their break, he explored the lower levels. The Zelkins had built their security around stopping other Zelkins, large armored beings who couldn't fit through small spaces or move quietly. But Jake was human. He could squeeze through ventilation systems that no Zelkan could enter. He could move silently across surfaces that would creak under alien weight. Most importantly, he could think in ways that the rigid Zelkan mind couldn't predict. Captain Vexthal noticed something was wrong during their 3rd week together. Small things kept happening around the palace that didn't make sense. Security doors sometimes opened by themselves. Computer terminals occasionally displayed data they shouldn't have access to. Guards reported strange sounds in areas that should have been empty. The maintenance crews are becoming careless, Vexthal complained to his superior during their morning briefing. There have been minor system glitches throughout the week. Fix it, General Morthek replied without looking up from his battle plans. We cannot have disruptions during the final invasion preparations. Jake listened to their conversation from inside an air vent above the general's office. The Zelkins still hadn't considered that someone might be actively working against them. Their minds simply couldn't grasp the concept of subtle infiltration. That afternoon, Jake made his boldest move yet. During the daily military parade in the central plaza, he positioned himself among the crowd of servants and citizens watching the display of Zelkan power. Massive war machines rolled past, tanks that could level buildings, aircraft that moved like silver lightning, soldiers in armor that seemed impossible to penetrate. But Jake saw something the cheering crowds missed. The parade formations followed predictable patterns. The war machines had visible weak points where different armor sections joined together. Most importantly, the entire display was designed to intimidate through overwhelming force. The Zelkins had never needed to develop subtle tactics. As the parade reached its climax, a minor incident occurred that would later be remembered as the beginning of the Empire's downfall. A section of security barrier suddenly collapsed, allowing excited civilians to surge toward the military vehicles. In the confusion that followed, guards scrambled to restore order while parade commanders shouted contradictory instructions. Jake used the chaos to get closer to the war machines than any civilian should have been able to. He memorized details about their construction, noted how their crews operated the controls, and observed their emergency procedures. When the guards finally restored order, they found nothing out of place, but Jake had learned enough to fill 3 intelligence reports. Back on Earth, Dr. Sarah Collins was working around the clock to analyze the information Jake sent back. Her expertise in xenobiology had proven crucial to understanding how the Zelkan mind worked. "They're like a species of living tanks," she explained to Lisa Rodriguez during one of their secure video calls. "Powerful, heavily armored, built for direct confrontation, but that's also their weakness. They can't adapt quickly to unexpected situations." Lisa studied the behavioral analysis Sarah had compiled. "You're saying they're predictable?" "More than that. They're psychologically incapable of true improvisation. Their entire social structure depends on hierarchy and following established protocols. When something doesn't fit their expectations, they either ignore it or try to force it into a familiar pattern." This insight proved valuable sooner than anyone expected. 3 days after the parade incident, a more serious security breach occurred in the palace. Someone had accessed the main computer network and downloaded classified files about troop movements. The intrusion was discovered quickly, but the intruder had vanished without a trace. The palace guard went into emergency mode. Every room was searched, every servant questioned, every security system examined. The Zelkans were thorough and methodical, but they were looking for evidence of another Zelkan, someone who would have left behind physical traces or used familiar hacking techniques. Jake had been more careful than that. He had used human-designed infiltration methods that left no traces the Zelkans would recognize. His small size had allowed him to access computer terminals through maintenance panels that security never monitored. His human understanding of electronics had let him interface with Zelkan systems in ways their programmers never anticipated. Captain Vexthal found Jake in his quarters, apparently reading a book about Zelkan history. "There has been a security incident," the alien announced. "All palace residents must submit to questioning." "Of course," Jake replied, setting down his book with appropriate concern. "I hope it wasn't anything serious. Someone infiltrated our military networks. A spy or saboteur?" Vexthal's 4 eyes studied Jake carefully. "You have been in the palace for several weeks now. Have you noticed anything unusual?" Jake appeared to think seriously about the question. "Well, there was that incident during the parade when the barriers failed, and I've heard some of the servants talking about equipment malfunctions, but I assumed these were normal maintenance issues." Vexthal made notes on his electronic pad. The human's answers matched what he expected. Observant but harmless, concerned but not knowledgeable about military matters. Just like every other interview he had conducted. "If you notice anything suspicious, you will report it immediately," Vexthal ordered. "Absolutely," Jake agreed. "I'm grateful for the Empire's protection. The last thing I would want is to see that protection compromised." After Vexthal left, Jake returned to his book, but his mind was already planning his next move. The security breach had put the Zelkans on alert, but it had also revealed exactly how they responded to threats. They followed predictable procedures, searched in obvious places, and never considered possibilities outside their experience. That evening, Jake sent another coded report to Earth. Hidden within academic observations, about Zelkan literature was crucial intelligence, about palace security protocols and military command structures. "The enemy's strength lies in their predictability," he wrote in language that looked like analysis of Zelkan poetry. "They cannot imagine solutions they have not encountered before. This limitation will be their downfall." On Earth, Lisa Rodriguez received the message and smiled grimly. Jake was doing more than just gathering intelligence. He was proving that human adaptability was a weapon the Zelkans couldn't defend against. The Empire still mocked Earth's special forces, still considered humans to be primitive and weak. But deep in their most secure facility, one human operative was systematically learning everything he needed to bring their mighty empire to its knees. And they still had no idea he was there. The breakthrough came during Jake's 4th week on Vorthak Prime, when Captain Vexthal made a mistake that would cost the Zelkan Empire everything. The young officer had grown comfortable with his human charge, viewing Jake as an amusing pet rather than a potential threat. "Would you like to see where real military planning happens?" Vexthal asked one morning. his tone carrying the same pride a child might show when displaying a favorite toy. "I have been assigned to brief the High Command about colonial defense systems. Perhaps you would find it educational." Jake's pulse quickened, but his expression remained appropriately grateful. "That would be fascinating. I've been studying Zelkan strategic thinking for my cultural research." Vexthul preened at the compliment. Like most Zelkans, he enjoyed having his intelligence acknowledged by lesser species. "Very well. But you must remain silent during the briefing. Military secrets are not for human ears." If only he knew, Jake thought. The military command center lay deep within the palace's most secure section. As they walked through multiple security checkpoints, Jake memorized every detail: guard positions, scanner types, entry codes that Vexthul carelessly entered within his view. The Zelkans never considered that a human might be observing their security procedures with professional interest. The command center itself was breathtaking in its scope. Massive holographic displays showed star maps spanning the entire Zelkan Empire. Real-time data streams tracked fleet movements, supply lines, and planetary defenses across 12 star systems. At the center of it all sat the Strategic Planning Core, a crystal matrix that processed military intelligence faster than any human computer. Jake stood quietly, in the corner as Vexthul delivered his briefing about human colonial defenses. The young captain spoke with casual confidence about humanity's pathetic attempts at military organization, describing Earth's scattered outposts as barely worth the fuel to reach them. But Jake was learning far more than Vexthul was teaching. His background in electrical engineering, earned during his pre-military years, allowed him to understand the command center's technical systems. His special forces training helped him identify the facility's tactical weaknesses. Most importantly, his human perspective let him see flaws that the Zelkans couldn't imagine. The Zelkan military operated on the principle of overwhelming force applied through rigid hierarchy. Orders flowed down from the High Command without question. Individual initiative was discouraged. Everything depended on the central command structure functioning perfectly. During a break in the briefing, Vexthul led Jake to an observation deck overlooking the center's main floor. "Impressive, is it not? From this room, the Empire coordinates the movements of 10,000 warships." "It's incredible," Jake replied honestly. "So much power controlled from one location." "Indeed. The Strategic Planning Core processes information from across the Empire every second. Without it, our military would be blind and helpless." Vexthul's chest swelled with pride at being part of such an advanced system. Jake nodded appreciatively while mentally cataloging everything he observed. The command center's greatest strength, its centralized control, was also its most vulnerable point. Disable the central systems and the entire Zelkan military would lose coordination. Over the following days, Jake began planning the most audacious infiltration of his career. His small size and human flexibility would be crucial, but he also needed to understand Zelkan technology well enough to sabotage it effectively. He started small, using his maintenance access to study the palace's computer networks during the night hours. Zelkan programming was logical but inflexible, designed by minds that valued efficiency over adaptability. Their security systems were powerful but predictable, scanning for threats they understood while ignoring possibilities they hadn't considered. Jake's human creativity proved invaluable as he developed workarounds for every security measure. Where Zelkan hackers would try to break through electronic barriers, Jake found ways to slip around them. Where alien infiltrators would need sophisticated equipment, Jake improvised solutions using materials available in any maintenance closet. His first successful penetration of the command center came during the early morning hours when skeleton crews monitored the overnight watch. Jake accessed the facility through a ventilation system that no Zelkan could navigate, emerging in a maintenance area that security rarely checked. The command center at night was a cathedral of glowing displays and humming processors. Automated systems maintained watch over the Empire, while most personnel slept. Jake moved like a ghost through the shadows, planting microscopic surveillance devices in locations where they would never be discovered. Each device was a masterpiece of human miniaturization technology, smaller than a grain of rice, powered by ambient electromagnetic radiation, virtually undetectable by Zelkan sensors. Within hours, Jake had created an intelligence network that gave Earth real-time access to the Empire's most secret military communications. Back on Earth, Colonel Danny Thompson coordinated the intelligence operation from a hidden facility beneath the Rockies. Danny had served with Jake in 3 different conflicts and knew, better than anyone, what the younger man was capable of achieving. "We're getting live feeds from their command center," he reported to Lisa Rodriguez during their daily briefing. "Fleet movements, supply schedules, strategic planning, everything." Lisa studied the incoming data with growing alarm. "Danny, they're not just planning to attack our colonies. They're preparing for total conquest. Occupation forces, civilian control protocols, resource extraction schedules. They want to enslave humanity." "Then we'd better make sure Jake succeeds," Danny replied grimly. "Because if he fails, we'll never get another chance like this." On Vorthak Prime, Jake was already moving to the next phase of his mission. The surveillance devices were providing valuable intelligence, but passive observation wouldn't be enough to stop the coming invasion. He needed to find a way to actively sabotage the Zelkan war machine. The opportunity came when Vexthul invited him to observe a wargame simulation. The exercise was designed to test the Empire's response to a hypothetical human uprising, a scenario the Zelkans considered so unlikely that they treated it as entertainment, rather than serious planning. "Watch how efficiently our forces would crush any human resistance," Vexthul said as the simulation began. "Your people would be conquered within days." Jake watched the holographic display with professional interest. The Zelkan strategy relied heavily on shock and awe, massive fleets appearing suddenly over human worlds, overwhelming defenses through superior firepower. It was an effective approach against enemies who fought conventionally, but it assumed that humans would respond in predictable ways. "Your admirals are very skilled," Jake commented, hiding his growing excitement. The simulation was revealing the exact timing and deployment patterns the Zelkans planned to use against Earth's colonies. More importantly, it showed him where their coordination systems were most vulnerable. As the wargame continued, Jake began to understand the full scope of what needed to be done. The Zelkan Empire was like a massive machine, powerful and efficient but dependent on its central control systems. Disrupt those systems at the right moment, and the entire military structure would collapse into chaos. That night, Jake sent his most important message yet to Earth. Hidden within observations about Zelkan recreational activities was a complete breakdown of the Empire's invasion plans and the location of their critical vulnerabilities. "The enemy's strength is also their weakness," he wrote in code that Lisa would understand immediately. "When the moment comes, one push in the right place will bring down their entire house of cards." The message reached Earth just as sensors detected massive fleet movements in the outer systems. The Zelkan invasion was beginning, but thanks to Jake's intelligence, humanity would be ready. The Empire still mocked Earth's special forces, still believed that humans were too primitive to pose a real threat. But deep in their most secure facility, one human operative had already begun the process that would destroy them. They just didn't know it yet. The discovery that changed everything came during Jake's 5th week on Vorthak Prime. He was monitoring communications from his hidden surveillance devices when he intercepted a classified transmission that made his blood run cold. "Biological weapons deployment authorized for Phase 2. General Morthek's voice crackled through the encrypted channel. "Once military resistance is eliminated, civilian populations will be reduced through targeted pathogen release." Jake sat in his small quarters, listening to the Zelkan commanders discuss humanity's extinction with the same casual tone they might use to plan a dinner menu. They weren't just planning conquest, they intended genocide. "The human reproductive system shows particular vulnerability to the modified virus," a scientist's voice added. "Estimated population reduction of 90% within 6 months, leaving sufficient labor force for resource extraction." That was the moment Jake abandoned all pretense of passive intelligence gathering. His mission parameters had assumed a conventional military threat, but this was something far worse. The Zelkans weren't planning to defeat humanity, they were planning to eliminate it. Jake's first target was the biological weapons facility, located 3 levels below the main command center. His surveillance had revealed that the lab operated on a skeleton crew during night shifts, relying primarily on automated security systems to protect their deadly research. Moving through the palace's maintenance tunnels had become routine for Jake, but this mission carried different stakes. Discovery now wouldn't just mean mission failure, it would mean the end of his species. He carried improvised charges made from palace cleaning supplies, devices that would look like minor equipment malfunctions to any investigation. The biological lab was a sterile nightmare of containment units and research equipment. Jake could see samples of the modified virus in their storage containers, innocent-looking vials that contained humanity's potential doom. He planted his charges carefully, ensuring that the destruction would look like an accident caused by system overload. But destroying one lab wouldn't be enough. The research data was backed up in multiple locations, and production facilities operated throughout the empire. Jake needed to create a catastrophic failure that would cripple the entire Zelkan military machine before they could implement their genocide plan. The next morning brought news that sent shockwaves through the palace. The biological weapons lab had suffered a complete containment failure during the night. Emergency teams in protective suits were still trying to understand what had caused the catastrophic system malfunction. Impossible. General Morthek raged during the emergency briefing that Vexthul was required to attend. Those systems had multiple redundancies. Equipment does not simply fail like this. Admiral Zexkar's massive form dominated the briefing room as he studied the damage reports. Perhaps it was sabotage. Have all personnel been accounted for? Every Zelkan citizen and worker has been questioned, the security chief reported. The investigation found no evidence of deliberate action. All indications point to a cascade failure in the environmental control systems. Jake watched from his usual corner, maintaining the expression of concerned ignorance that had served him so well. The Zelkans were doing exactly what he expected, looking for threats they understood while ignoring the possibility that a harmless human could be responsible. That afternoon, Jake escalated his campaign. Using access codes he had memorized during his visits to the command center, he began a systematic assault on the Zelkan military's information systems. His targets weren't obvious. Instead of trying to steal or destroy data, he introduced subtle errors into their databases. Fleet positions were shifted by small amounts. Supply schedules were altered by hours rather than days. Communication protocols were modified in ways that would cause confusion rather than complete failure. Each change was minor enough to escape notice during routine checks, but together they would create chaos when the invasion began. The beauty of Jake's approach was that it exploited the Zelkan military's greatest strength, their reliance on perfect information and precise coordination. The aliens had built a war machine so complex and efficient that even small disruptions would cascade into major problems. Major Kate Sullivan, Earth's intelligence chief, watched the reports from Jake with growing amazement. "He's not just gathering intelligence anymore," she told Lisa Rodriguez during their secure communication. "He's actively dismantling their entire military capability." "The risks he's taking are enormous," Lisa replied, worry evident in her voice. "If they discover what he's doing?" "They won't," Kate said with confidence. Jake understands something about warfare that the Zelkans never will. Sometimes the most effective attack is the one your enemy can't even recognize as an attack. On Vorthak Prime, Jake was proving Kate's assessment correct. His next target was the Empire's communication network, the system that allowed instant coordination across 12 star systems. Rather than trying to destroy it completely, Jake introduced a virus of his own design. The program was elegant in its simplicity. It would lie dormant in the system until activated by a specific signal pattern, the pattern that would be used to coordinate the invasion of Earth's colonies. When that signal was sent, Jake's virus would activate and begin introducing random delays into all military communications. Orders would arrive minutes or hours late. Status reports would be corrupted. Emergency signals would be lost in cascading system failures. The Zelkan fleet would find itself operating blind, just when perfect coordination was most crucial. Jake planted the virus during another late-night infiltration, this time accessing the primary communication hub through a maintenance shaft that required him to crawl through spaces barely large enough for his human frame. The work took 6 hours and dawn was breaking by the time he returned to his quarters. By now, the palace was buzzing with rumors about equipment failures and system malfunctions. The biological lab disaster, had been followed by a series of minor incidents that were causing growing concern among the Zelkan leadership. Nothing seemed connected, but the pattern was troubling. Captain Vexthul voiced the growing paranoia during one of his escort duties with Jake. "Someone is working against the Empire," he confided as they walked through the palace gardens. "Too many systems are failing for this to be coincidence." "That's terrible," Jake replied with appropriate concern. "Do you think it could be saboteurs from one of the conquered worlds?" "Perhaps, but we have never encountered enemies capable of such subtle infiltration. Our security systems are designed to stop conventional attacks." Vexthul paused, his four eyes scanning the peaceful garden as if expecting threats to emerge from the flowering plants. "I'm sure your people will figure it out," Jake said reassuringly. "The Empire's intelligence services are legendary." What Vexthul didn't know was that Jake's campaign of sabotage was entering its final phase. The surveillance network he had established was now providing real-time intelligence to Earth's military planners. The communication virus was in place and ready to activate. The biological weapons program had been set back by months, but the most crucial target still remained: the strategic planning core that controlled the entire Zelkan war machine. Destroying it would require Jake to penetrate the most heavily defended location in the Empire and survive long enough to complete his mission. That evening, Jake received a coded message from Earth that made his decision final. Zelkan invasion fleet detected moving toward human colonies. Estimated arrival time 72 hours? Execute final phase immediately. Jake looked around his small quarters one last time. For 5 weeks, this had been his home while he systematically dismantled the greatest military empire in the galaxy. Now it was time to finish what he had started. The Zelkan Empire had mocked Earth's special forces and dismissed humanity as primitive and weak. In 72 hours, they would learn the price of their arrogance. Jake Martinez, the operative they had ignored and underestimated, was about to bring their empire to its knees. The invasion began exactly as the Zelkan High Command had planned. Across 3 star systems, massive fleets emerged from hyperspace and took positions around human colony worlds. Admiral Zexkar stood in the command center, watching displays that showed the overwhelming force now arrayed against humanity's scattered outposts. "Begin Phase 1, he ordered with satisfaction. "Let the humans see the futility of resistance." But as soon as the invasion signals were transmitted across the Empire's communication network, Jake's virus activated. What should have been a perfectly coordinated assault immediately began falling apart. The first sign of trouble came from the 3rd Fleet, attacking the mining colonies in the Kepler system. "Command, we are not receiving targeting data for planetary defenses," the Fleet Admiral reported. "Request immediate. Transmission of intelligence updates. Data was sent 10 minutes ago," came the confused reply from Vorthak. "Prime. Confirm receipt of tactical package. 77 Alpha. Negative command. No tactical data received." Admiral Zexkar frowned at his communication officer. "Retransmit the tactical package immediately." "Sir, our systems show successful transmission." The data should have arrived. What the Zelkans didn't understand was that their own communication network was now working against them. Jake's virus was intercepting crucial messages and introducing random delays that grew worse as the system tried to compensate. Orders were arriving hours late or not at all. Status reports were being corrupted. The perfect coordination that Zelkan military doctrine required was dissolving into chaos. In the Vega system, the 2nd Fleet found itself attacking empty space. Their target coordinates had been shifted by Jake's database alterations, and the human colonies they expected to find were nowhere near their predicted locations. By the time they corrected course, Earth's defenders had repositioned their forces based on intelligence Jake had provided. The problems cascaded rapidly. Supply ships carrying ammunition and fuel couldn't find the fleets they were supposed to resupply. Reinforcement squadrons received orders directing them to sectors that didn't exist. Medical frigates rushed to assist casualties from battles that hadn't happened yet. "What is happening?" General Morthek demanded as reports of confusion poured in from across the invasion front. "How can our entire fleet lose coordination simultaneously?" The technical staff scrambled to diagnose the problem, but they were looking for conventional system failures. None of them suspected that a single human operative had spent weeks planting the seeds of their military's destruction. Deep in the palace, Jake was preparing for his final mission. The invasion's launch had triggered his virus as planned, but he needed to ensure the Zelkan command structure couldn't adapt to the crisis. That meant destroying the strategic planning core that served as the Empire's military brain. The core was housed in the most secure section of the command center, protected by automated defenses that could track and eliminate any unauthorized presence. But Jake had spent weeks studying those defenses, and his human perspective had revealed weaknesses that Zelkan engineers never considered. The security system was designed to stop large armored Zelkan intruders. It watched for heat signatures, metal objects, and movement patterns that matched potential threats. But it wasn't programmed to recognize a small human moving through maintenance spaces too narrow for any Zelkan to navigate. Jake accessed the core chamber through a ventilation shaft barely wide, enough for his shoulders. The crawl took 40 minutes and left him covered in dust and lubricant, but it brought him to within 20 feet of the strategic planning core without triggering a single alarm. The core itself was beautiful in its alien complexity, a crystal matrix the size of a small building, pulsing with energy as it processed military data from across the Empire. Destroying it would be like cutting the brain out of the Zelkan war machine. Jake's charges were sophisticated devices, designed to create an electromagnetic pulse that would shatter the crystal matrix at the molecular level. The explosion would be relatively small, but the electromagnetic cascade would destroy every computer system within a mile radius. As he placed the charges, Jake could hear the growing panic in the command center above. Officers were shouting contradictory orders, while technicians frantically tried to restore communication with their scattered fleets. The Empire's perfect military machine was tearing itself apart. "Admiral, we've lost contact with the 7th Fleet entirely," one officer reported. Their last transmission indicated they were under attack by forces that shouldn't exist. "Impossible," Zexkar replied, but his voice carried doubt for the first time. "Human defensive capabilities are minimal. How can they be mounting effective resistance?" What the Admiral didn't know was that Earth's military had repositioned based on Jake's intelligence. Human forces were waiting in ambush at locations the Zelkans never expected, using tactics specifically designed to exploit the confusion Jake had created in their communication systems. Colonel Danny Thompson coordinated Earth's defense from his command bunker, watching as reports came in from across the battle zone. "The Zelkan fleets are completely disorganized," he reported to Lisa Rodriguez. "Whatever Jake did to their systems, it's working better than we hoped." "He's still inside their command center," Lisa replied tensely. "No extraction signal yet. Jake knows what he's doing. He'll complete the mission." In the command center on Vorthak Prime, Jake finished placing his charges and activated the timer. He had 15 minutes to reach minimum safe distance before the electromagnetic pulse would destroy every electronic device in the facility, including his own equipment. But as he prepared to retreat through the ventilation system, alarms began sounding throughout the command center. Someone had finally noticed the pattern of system failures and realized they were under attack. "Full security lockdown," Admiral Zexkar ordered. "Seal all access points. Find the saboteur." Jake heard heavy footsteps moving through the corridors above as Zelkan guards began their search. The ventilation shaft that had been his highway through the palace was now a trap. If they found him in the narrow space, he would have nowhere to run. He made a decision that would have seemed impossible to anyone who knew Jake's careful, methodical approach to operations. Instead of trying to hide, he dropped down into the command center itself and walked calmly toward the main exit. The chaos in the command center was so complete that none of the rushing officers paid attention to one more figure moving through the crowd. Jake's human size made him nearly invisible among the towering Zelkans, and his calm demeanor suggested he belonged there. He was halfway to the exit when Captain Vexthol spotted him. "Human, what are you doing in a restricted area?" "The alarms woke me," Jake replied with perfect innocence. "I got lost trying to find my quarters. This place is so confusing during an emergency." Vexthol hesitated, torn between the urgent crisis and his duty to escort the human. In that moment of indecision, Jake's timer reached 0. The electromagnetic pulse that erupted from the strategic planning core was invisible but devastating. Every screen in the command center went dark. Emergency lighting failed. Communication systems died. The technological heart of the Zelkan Empire stopped beating in an instant. In the sudden darkness and chaos, Jake slipped away from the stunned Vexthol and made his way to the predetermined extraction point. His backup communication device, shielded from the electromagnetic pulse, sent a single coded signal to orbit. 20 minutes later, a human stealth ship that had been hiding in the system's asteroid belt dropped its cloak and retrieved its most valuable cargo. Jake Martinez, the operative who had destroyed the greatest military empire in the galaxy, was finally going home. The aftermath was swift and decisive. Without their command structure, the Zelkan invasion fleets found themselves scattered across space with no coordination and no orders. Human forces, prepared and positioned based on Jake's intelligence, systematically destroyed the confused enemy squadrons. Admiral Zexkar died when his flagship was overwhelmed by human fighters that attacked from directions his tactical computers said were impossible. General Morthek surrendered his remaining forces after watching his entire battle group dissolve into chaos and defeat. The Zelkan Empire, which had ruled 12 star systems through superior technology and overwhelming force, collapsed within 72 hours. Their rigid military structure, once their greatest strength, became the instrument of their destruction when that structure was turned against them. On Earth, Jake Martinez stood before a room full of military leaders and government officials, receiving honors for the most successful infiltration mission in human history. But his thoughts were on the lessons learned from his time among the Zelkans. They made the same mistake many enemies have made, he told the assembled crowd. They confused different with inferior. They saw our flexibility as weakness and our creativity as primitive thinking. By the time they realized their error, it was too late. Commander Lisa Rodriguez, now promoted to admiral for her role in coordinating the operation, smiled as she watched her former operative address the crowd. The Empire had mocked Earth's special forces and dismissed humanity as no threat. They would never make that mistake again.